Okay, Be'ezat Hashem, Chevra, we're back in business here. Be'ezat Hashem, we're picking up today in Masechet Shabbat, the bottom of Yud Bet Amud Aleph, and today we're going to learn Yud Bet Amud Bet 12b. We're going to have two sections in today's learning. The first section, which is a fascinating and very practical section that has to do with Bikur Cholim on Shabbat and Bikur Cholim in general. We're going to go through certain halachot, certain sensitivities about Bikur Cholim, visiting the sick. And in the second section, we'll go back to the Mishnah where we talked about reading by the candle. Two parts of that: general reading, where it's prohibited, and then specifically with the Chazan. We'll speak more about that later, the story in regards to that. So we're starting second to last line on Yud Bet Amud Aleph. We finished off last week talking about Machloket Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. So Beit Shammai said these types of things that are considered Mimtzo Chavtzecha, even though there's a aspect of mitzvah associated, like L'Shadei Chabanot, Tinok L'Lam De Sefer, we say it in the Zmirot. You're not allowed to do them on Shabbat. It's like Mimtzo Chavtzecha. But Beit Hillel said, that's not Mimtzo Chavtzecha, because Dafka it says Chavtzecha, but not Chavtze Shamayim. So he said, if a person is involved with something that has an element of mitzvah associated with it, it's permissible on Shabbat. So you could arrange a tutor for your son on Shabbat. You could be Mishadei Chabanot. These kinds of things are permitted. That was the Machloket. So we begin today with the first section talking about how we do Bikur Cholim on Shabbat. Now, as a general rule, we know we're not supposed to daven for our tzrachim on Shabbat. We know that. We're not supposed to ask for our own desires, the things that we need on Shabbat. We're not supposed to. When you go to do Bikur Cholim, part of the procedure, part of the process is supposed to be, you daven that the choleh should get better. You daven, meaning somebody told me, just told me that, and I was so impressed by it. Somebody, I'm not going to say who it is, but either way, he was in the hospital, he had a serious stroke, whatever it was, and he told me every day somebody from the kollel would come by, go to his door, daven, and then leave. This is somebody he didn't have a kesha with. He would go to next to his door, daven, say Tehillim something, and then walk away. It's done. You're davening for the cholet to get better. That's a beautiful thing. You didn't even know the guy. Another element is talk to the cholet and make him happy, etc. But you also daven. But on Shabbat we can't ask for our tzrachim. So how do we do Bikur Cholim on Shabbat then? That's what we're going to discuss now. What are you supposed to say? Because you're not allowed to ask for things. What are you supposed to say? Tanu Rabbanan, says the Braita. We're going to have a few shitot here. If somebody enters to visit a sick person on Shabbat, Omer, so we should say what we famously say in the Mishaberach. We say, Shabbat hi milizok. It's Shabbat. Now what does it mean? From crying out. It means we're not allowed to cry out. Shabbat hi milizok. We're not allowed to cry out. V'rufuah krova lavo. However, Hashem will bring you a quick recovery. Meaning to say is, because we're listening to Hashem and not crying out like He wants us to do, so therefore Hashem will give you a quick recovery. It's not a tefillah. It's saying, in the zchut of what we're not crying out, because Hashem wants us to not cry out, hopefully you'll have a quick recovery. That's Tanakama. Reb Meir says differently. He says, Yecholah hi shetirachem. On Shabbat you should say, It means Shabbat. Shabbat should be a source of mercy, meaning it should be mercy for you that you should have refuah shleima. Yud Bet Amud Bet. Rabbi Yehuda says a little bit differently. You say, Hamakom yirachem alecha. Hashem will have mercy on you. Ve'al cholei Yisrael, and on the sick people of Israel. Now, that sounds very much like a tefillah. So the way that the Maharsha explains is you're not davening that this person should be healed, but you're telling him Hashem should have mercy on you and He will heal you. So it's not really asking for your needs, it's more encouragement. You want to say it like that. Rashi, I forgot to mention, at the bottom of Yud Bet Amud Aleph says, Shabbat himili is it's a way of comforting the person. Because he might feel bad. He might feel, if I can't daven for myself, I can't ask for my needs on Shabbat, so I'm going to get more sick and then I'm going to not recover. So you're saying, no, Shabbat himili refuah krova lavo. Hashem will take care of you because you're listening to His word. It's more of a nichum. It's comforting him. You're going to be fine, which is not exactly a tefillah. Rabbi Yossi is the fourth opinion. Hamakom yirachem alecha. Hashem should have mercy on you. Betoch cholei Yisrael. Now he introduces a new point, which is a big yesod. Amidst cholei Yisrael, together with the other sick Jewish people. So Rashi explains from here that this is a very important idea. Shemitoch shekolelan ima acherim tvilato nishma'at bizchutan shel rabim. Big yesod is when we daven. If we only daven for ourselves, it only has certain power. But when we include ourselves with a tzibur, it takes on a far greater role, which is why the entire Amidah is belashon rabim. Right? Hashivenu avinu letoratech. Hashivenu. It's not return me. Hashivenu, refa'enu, shma koleinu. It's always belashon rabim. Because praying in a lashon of rabim, of the schut of the rabim, assists you more. So therefore, we say also when we greet somebody on Shabbat, we're visiting a sick person. Hamakom yirachem alecha betoch cholei Yisrael. We want to include it amongst cholei Yisrael because that is a greater power, and we're comforting him in that way. What do you say, Matan? Similar idea. Now there is I just wanted to point this out because it was a Gemara Rosh Hashanah that we learned. We learned in Masechet Rosh Hashanah. The top Tosafot points this out. We learned in Masechet Rosh Hashanah, we had a machloket, when is the psak din for people throughout the year? If you remember, there was a machloket, we had 4 shitot, if I remember correctly, 4 or 5 shitot in Masechet Rosh Hashanah. The Gemar din, the psak din for people and judgments. So he quotes in the top Tosafot, if you want to take a look, it's just very interesting. I thought this was we learned it. It says, Kashi l'Rabbeinu Tam, ma mo'elet tefillah l'Rabbi Meir v'Rabbi Yehuda. How does it help, according to Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda? Tikamer perakama de Rosh Hashanah, hakol nidonin beRosh Hashanah, v'gzar din shelahem nechtam b'Yom HaKippurim divrei Rabbi Meir. So Rabbi Meir holds that the judgment is on Rosh Hashanah, and the gzar din is on Yom Kippur. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, hakol nidonin beRosh Hashanah, v'gzar din shel kol echad ve'echad nechtam bizmano, v'pesach al ha'tfuah, v'adam b'Yom HaKippurim. So Rabbi Yehuda said that the gzar din is on Rosh Hashanah, and then there's different elements. There's the tfuah, and Adam is on Yom Kippur. Rabbi Yossi Omer, exactly, Adam nidon b'chol yom v'yom. Okay, and it says over there, Amar Rav Yosef, Keman matzlina na'idna ketziri v'amarek, Rav Yossi. The Gemara there says, wait a second. If it's true that the gzar din is on Yom Kippur, according to Rabbi Yehuda, according to Rabbi Meir, what benefit is there to daven for a sick person in Shvat? It's already gzar din before. That's the Gemara. It says over there that question. So the Gemara answers, it's like Rabbi Yossi who says there's a new gzar din every day. Chidush, that's what the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah said. But it can't, so the kasha that Tosafot is saying, I don't understand. Mashma de l'Rabbi Meir l'Rabbi Yehuda, lo ma'an yatziluta. It sounds like according to the other Tanaim, who Rabbi Meir Rabbi Yehuda here, who say that there is a tefillah you say for the choleh, it doesn't help you, so why are you praying for the choleh here?
But even if it's a gzar din, that's without praying. There's a gzar din.
Okay, hold on. So
pray the kochot tefillah,
this is true. The Gemara says that, but one of the terutzim the Gemara there says is it's only like Rabbi Yossi. The whole concept of tefillah to ask for something is not like Rabbi Meir Rabbi Yehuda. So why are Rabbi Meir Rabbi Yehuda saying over here tefillot associated with a choleh? It doesn't help. So says Tosafot, v'yesh lomar dacha b'Shabbat shavin b'Shabbat sheben Rosh Hashanah v'in Yom HaKippurim. Unbelievable chidush. We're talking about Shabbat Shuvah. We're talking about the Shabbat between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur when the Gzar Din and the Psak Din, it's still in the middle of the process. So that's the Shabbat. When you go to a Choleh, you could pray and it'll help him, hopefully. Unbelievable Chidush. Otherwise, Rabbi Meir Rabbi Yehuda would say, you don't say these things because it's not effective. Chidush. Then he says, the second answer, which is like Yochai. The Gemara there answers, even according to the other shitot, there is a concept that even after Gzar Din, if you cry out, it could still fix. It could still fix up the situation or change something, so that would be effective as well. But it's very interesting. According to the first answer of the Gemara, that it says no. According to Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, it doesn't help afterwards. The Chidush, that answer, you'd have to say here, we're talking specifically about Shabbat Shuvah. Fascinating idea. That's how the Gemara would be understood.
Even for the Megillah, we learned it. It was a Gzar Din. They asked Eliyahu Navi, Moshe Rabbeinu asked him, this is a betit or bedam?
Right.
even כשנחתם הגזר דין, עדיין אפשר...
בקיצור, we go like the second teretz, Baruch Hashem. So we have the idea of tefillah. We can cry out to Hashem. So back to the story at hand. Let's get back to the Gemara. So, machloket, what are you supposed to say at the Cholah and Shabbat? So we had all these shittot. Let's continue. Shevna ish Yerushalayim. Now there was a fellow, Shevna, who was a prominent person. Ish, when it says ish in the Mishnayot, like in Pirkei Avot, it says it often. So Shevna ish Yerushalayim. B'knisato omer, when he would enter the Cholah, he would say the following. He would say Shalom. Now Shalom is a greeting, but it's also a little bit of a bracha. It's a little bit of, because it's the name of Hashem, we learned. When he would leave the Cholah, he would say, Shabbat hi milizok, urufua krova lavo. Again, I can't cry out because it's Shabbat, but you should have a recovery. V'rachamav merubin, Hashem's mercy is great. V'shivtu b'shalom, and you should rest on Shabbat in peace. He would start off with Shalom and he would end off with Shalom, because Shalom has great power. It's also an Amidah, it's the end of the Amidah. We know it's the Kli, Kibul of all the brachot is Shalom. It's a tremendous thing. So one point you do see from here is when we go to visit a sick person, it's not only to talk to them, make them feel good, we should also try to a degree to daven for them. Say a Tehillim, say something, because also that's what we're trying to do to help them out in their state, how they are. That's the idea. Beautiful. Let's continue. Says the Gemara, Keman az lahad amar. By the way, I thought this was fascinating also. Tosafot points out over here, Shevna is a person in Nevi'im who was considered a Rasha. So Tosafot says, generally we don't name after Rishayim. So therefore, Rabbeinu Tam actually says, the Girsa can't be Shevna, it has to be, it's a different Girsa, Shechna. Changes the Girsa. You don't name after Rishayim. Now, I don't really understand this. I want to just point out why I don't necessarily understand what he's saying. You don't choose your name. Who chooses your name?
Parents.
Your parents. So if your parents named you Nimrod, that doesn't mean you did anything wrong. They named you Nimrod. If they're, they don't know better, so they named you Nimrod. That's a different story. But he says we don't name after Rishayim. But Tosafot goes on, the Re says, he doesn't necessarily say you have to say it's a problem. Because if you find in history there was a Rasha named Avraham, right? So you can't name your son Avraham? Of course not. So he says there was a person in history, Shevna, who was a tzaddik also, and therefore we could name after Shevna because it's not necessarily a psul on the name. Now what comes out from the Re though is, sounds like because there was also a tzaddik named that, so it's not a problem. But an example like Nimrod, just as an example, which a lot of Israelis do use, which is wrong, l'chaura, because that actually was a Rasha, and we don't know of a tzaddik in history who was named Nimrod, a significant person. So we're not supposed to say Shem Rashaim Yerkav, is that actually you're not supposed to name after them. But certainly if a Rasha was named Avraham, that wouldn't passel the name for future generations. It makes sense. So that's this discussion over here in Shevna. It also comes up with Avshalom. Avshalom is another example. There's a Tana, I believe, an Amora named Avshalom. So Tosafot there says it must have been, it was Avishalom. Because Avshalom, the son of David, was Rasha. A similar idea. There's this debate. What are we saying, Matan?
But it's not the name of the person, it's the Ma'asim. It's the actions.
It's true, but we don't, there's a concept, Shem Rishaim Yerkav, is we don't want to continue the legacy of wicked people. So you don't want to name after somebody wicked, because it's like name your kid Haman. Chas v'shalom. You never think about it, because you don't want to continue the name.
It's a huge influence on the kids, the name.
True.
Huge. And actually, he said we don't name people even before Avraham Avinu. From Avraham Avinu and on, it must be tzaddik. Every time you call the child the name, you wake up the source of this person, the tzaddik. It's a big. And by the way, Nimrod, everybody, if you go to rabbi, everybody changes.
They change the name, right? They change the name.
There's no Nimrod is a very.
It's a very strong, very strong.
I remember
idea.
somebody in my school was Nimrod.
Yeah.
He was a good guy.
Yeah.
Nimrod.
Not his fault.
No, but he went to a really big trouble. But they make tshuva, they changed his name to Tzion. He was a big celebrity.
It makes sense.
He was like a celeb, like a famous person.
Okay.
But he changed it. Nimrod is a really
beautiful
name.
Beautiful.
That's Rav Yoram said many times when they go to a Brit, he's sitting Sandak, and the parents give Yuli, he said quietly, I said Yaakov.
Really?
Yes, because it's really, they have no idea how they're ruining the child's future.
You should tell them. Tell them to change it.
Yeah, but
they don't listen.
But they all invite him, the rabbi, to Sandak. They ask him the name. They sit on the chair, and they said, the rabbi said quiet. I said Yaakov.
Okay, let's go. Says the Gemara, now which of the opinions are followed in the following statement of Rabbi Chanina? Rabbi Chanina said, if somebody has a sick person in his house, when he davens, he should include that person amongst Cholei Yisrael. It's like Rabbi Yossi, like we said before. We say this practically in the Tefillah, when we say at the end, we always mention them, we always say this, because we always want to include Jews amongst other Jews. That's a schut, major schut. Okay.
But what's the difference with Rabbi Yehuda also? Ve'al, betoch.
It's interesting. You have to know Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi sound kind of similar. Ve'al Cholei Yisrael. You're davening also for Cholei Yisrael. Right.
Betoch.
Rabbi Yossi sounds more strong in that way. Betoch Cholei Yisrael. It sounds a stronger way. Yeah. It was with difficulty that they allowed comforting the mourners and visiting the sick on Shabbat. Again, because we spoke out before, there is an element of tsa'ar that this can cause, but it was bekoshi, but they were hitiru apparently, like we said before, because it actually brings simcha, brings joy, so it's not a negative thing. All right, let's continue. Now, that was all about on Shabbat, but moving on to the same topic. Amar Rabba Bar Chana ki hava azlinan batrei de Rabbi Elazar. When we used to follow after Rabbi Elazar, now they were going during the weekday, the shiulei betvicha, to visit sick people. Shiulei betvicha is levaker cholim. We would go visit sick people. This is on a Sunday, not on Shabbat. So Zimnin Amar, sometimes Rabbi Elazar would say, Hamakom yifkadcha leshalom. Hashem should remember you for peace. Right? It's a beautiful thing in Hebrew. V'zimnin Amar, and sometimes he would say in Aramaic, Rachamana yidchrinach lishlam. Hashem should remember you for peace. It's the same thing. It's just one is in Hebrew and one is in Aramaic. So either he would pray in Hebrew if the sick person understood Hebrew, or if not, and the person understood, which was the common language, was Aramaic, he would pray that the person should be remembered for peace in Aramaic. Now, the Gemara is about to point out something that is very interesting, which is, in general, there's an idea we don't pray in Aramaic. So the Gemara is going to tell us, why don't we pray in Aramaic? We're not supposed to. Because the Malachei HaSharet don't recognize Aramaic. I'm going to tell you what the Gemara says. And the Malachei HaSharet will not be able then to bring our tefillot to Hashem. This is a difficult concept. I'm going to read it inside and I'll tell you chidush as to how to understand this idea, because it is difficult. Hey Chiyavirachi, says the Gemara, how could Rabbi Elazar have prayed in Aramaic? Amar Rav Yehuda, but Rav Yehuda teaches, Le'olam al yish'al adam tzracha b'lashon arami. Person should not ask for his needs. He shouldn't pray in Aramaic. Amar Rav Yochanan explained, Kol ha'sho'el tzracha b'lashon arami. If he does pray in Aramaic, ein malachei hasharet niskakin lo. The malachei hasharet do not assist him. Now, she'en malachei hasharet makirim b'lashon arami, because they don't recognize lashon arami. Now, Rashi seems to learn here. Just what does that mean? It says, the Kasha is in Rabbi Elazar, how could he pray in Aramaic? But Rashi seems to learn, the later Rashi actually says, is that the Malachei HaSharet would take the tefillot and bring it to Hashem me'achorei pargud, behind the curtain, whatever the pshat is exactly in that. But the problem with this is very difficult at face value, because, and I'm going to show you the Rambam speaks this out, it would sound like from this, when we're praying, who are we praying to? Chas v'shalom, to Malachim. Chas v'shalom to say such a thing, because that's actually Asur, it's Begeder Avodah Zarah. So I want to show you, the Rishonim get involved over here. They say the implication is, you can't pray in Aramaic because they don't recognize Aramaic, but that sounds like you're praying to them. You don't pray to Malachim, Chas v'shalom. And really, the Rambam speaks this out. It's the Rambam in his Perush HaMishnayot, the 10th parak of Masechet Sanhedrin. He goes through the Yud Gimel Ikarim of Emunah, the 13 principles, foundations of our faith. And in the 5th one, the Rambam says, I'll read it to you because it's kedai to hear. Shehu yitbarach hu ha'ra'oi la'ovdo, ulegadlo, ule'odio gdulato, v'la'asot mitzvotav, v'shelo ya'asu kazeh lemishu tachta b'mtziut min ha'malachim, והכוכבים, והגלגלים, והיסודות, ומה שמורכב מהם, לפי שכולם מוטבעים, ועל פעולתם אין משפט, ולא בחירה. אלא לא לבדו Hashem יתברך. We only daven to Hashem. We don't daven chas v'shalom to anything else in the world. Not to malachim, not to the stars, not to anything else. Not to serve them. Not even to use them as an intermediary, a middleman, in order to come close to Hashem. Etc. He's here al avodah zara. Much of the Torah talks about the Yisur of avodah zara means you can't daven to anything else besides Hashem. The problem is this Gemara, and there's other implications like this also, that seem to show, to some degree, the Malachim are involved. So what's going on over here exactly? So Mata, what do you want to say?
It sounds like, I think so, it's a simple, the Pshat is...
What do you say?
It's like you're in Israel, and Purim coming, and you package Mishloach Manot, beautiful one, you wrap it all beautiful,
yeah.
But you write it in Chinese, the address. Okay. The guy that delivered, you don't know what it is. Assembly, the Malachim just deliver the tefillot. They're not the one you daven for them. They just only do service for bringing to Hashem. But if you don't put address, and you speak in Arabic, I don't understand. I don't know what's the address. I want to do that for you.
Beautiful. So big yesod here. Listen to this. I saw two pshatim the art scroll brings down. One is the kotev and one is the meiri. Two pshatim, which are very important pshatim actually. The kotev explains as follows. He says when a person davens, the angels act in response. Meaning is they bring my tefillot to Hashem. I'm not praying chas v'shalom to the angels, but there is an idea that they act in a response to bring my tefillot to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now, if I pray in Aramaic, which is the commonly spoken language, that was in Bavel, that's what they spoke, so such tefillot tend to be recited mechanically without feeling a devotion. Very interesting. I would have thought the opposite, but this is what the Sefer Kotev writes on the Yun Yaakov. He says, if I daven in my regular language, it might be said without kavanah. Just like chol, it's like speaking normally, not with depth and kavanah. In such a case, the malachim don't listen to that. They don't want that, and therefore they're not going to take those tefillot to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But if I pray in Hebrew, Hebrew is so special that regardless of how I pray with kavanah, it's going to go to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now, the Meiri says a bit of a different idea. He says the idea is that when I pray in any other language other than Hebrew, it's less likely to be accepted. And the reason is because I'm not used to praying not in Hebrew. Usually you pray in Hebrew, that's what we usually say. So what I'm used to praying, it's usually said with more seriousness and focus, it will naturally be more accepted. He doesn't learn the malachim so dafka. So therefore, in other languages, for example, Aramaic, it won't naturally be accepted as well. And because of that, the malachim don't recognize. Mm-hmm. Now, just this idea that they don't recognize, it's a very interesting idea. I saw the different Sfarim bring different ideas with me they don't recognize. Either they actually don't recognize that language. Safot quotes over here that Gavriel did recognize it because he taught Yosef HaTzadik in Mitzrayim, also Aramaic. But Kitzer, maybe they don't value it. Some of the Mefarshim say they don't value it. It's not chashuv to them because it's like a shibush of Lashon HaKodesh. So that's perhaps what it means that they don't recognize. It really means it's like a shibush, so it's not a significant language. Either way, back in the Gemara over here, see, to me that's the whole thing is a chidush. Because I would have thought, it's my own thought, there's stories about people that when they daven, they might not be so focused, but when they talk in their own language, it's more like a kid talking to his father. There's more of a natural, they say stories about like Hasidic Rebbes that in the middle of their, very interesting, I just was like learning a little bit about this.
It's a big difference.
You talk, he says, Heilige Bashefer, he's talking to Hashem, it's like much more of a connection in a certain way. The way we're saying over here is Arami is not recognized, and therefore the tefillot wouldn't necessarily be brought to Hashem. No, but that's what the Gemara seems to say. You're right. There are parts Chazal or Metaken for us to say. Brich Shmei, there are parts that we do say in Aramaic. It's true. There are. Exactly. There are definitely parts that we do. So Chazal Metaken those parts. That's it. You have to know exactly. So asks the Gemara, how could Rabbi Elazar say this idea? Rachmana yidkarinach leshlam. Hashem should remember you for peace. The Malachim will not assist him because the Malachim don't recognize that language. They don't value that language, you could say. Mm-hmm. So the Gemara answers, Shani choleh dishchina imo. Choleh is different. When you go daven by a choleh, who is with the choleh? Hashem. Shechina. So you're not going, you don't need the malachim's assistance, because when you daven by a choleh, it's like you're davening directly to the source. So therefore, you could speak in Aramaic and it's mikubal also without any issue. How do we know the Shechina is with the choleh? So we know in the Torah. Where do we find in the Torah? By Avraham Avinu. Where by Avraham Avinu?
Kadosh Baruch Hu come to visit him.
Oh, that's true. He came to visit him. He came to Mevaker Choleh. That's true. So Rashi does mention that. But by Yaakov Avinu, we find, Rashi says, we learned that he bowed to the head of the bed. Why did he bow to the head of the bed? Because Shechina is Lemala Merashotav Shel Choleh. The Gemara does not bring this source. The Gemara brings a different source that just shows it Bechlal, that the Shechina is with a Choleh. The Amar of An and Amar Rav, Minayin Shechina Soed et HaCholeh. How do we know the Shechina supports a sick person? There's a special thing. The Shechina is with a sick person. Shene'emar, it says in Tehillim, Hashem yisadenu al eres divai. Tehillim Mem Aleph. It says Hashem supports the sick person al eres divai, on his sick bed. So there's a special inyan, a sick person on his bed. The Shechina rests amongst him. So when you go to daven there, you could say in Aramaic, no problem. It goes straight to the source. Tani Nami Hachi, the Braita continues, a similar idea. Somebody goes to visit a sick person. He should not sit on top of a bed. Meaning the one who's visiting. Nor should he sit on a chair. Wrap himself. Usually it means in talit, and sit in front of him. Because the Shechina is above the head of the Choleh. Now what it means is, you shouldn't sit on a higher place than the bed. Because if the Shechina is on the bed and you're sitting on a higher place, it's a bizayon to the Shechina that you're sitting higher. So the Mefarshim say, therefore, if the bed is, especially in hospitals, they're usually on higher plate, you could sit on a chair. It's not a problem because it's not above the Shechina. But it shouldn't be above it because that would be bizayon to Hashem, as if to say. Shene'emaz, the pasuk tells us, Hashem yisadenu al eres divai. Sorry, did I skip? Mimnei shechina lemala mirashotav shel choleh, because the Shechina is above the head of the choleh. Shene'emaz, Hashem yisadenu al eres divai. The idea mit'atef yoshev lefanav. Interesting. I saw the Mefarshim explain. Rashi says, Me'emat Shechina ke'adam yoshev be'ema. You have to realize the Shechina is here by the Choleh. So if you block it, you're not looking side to side, you're just focused on Shechina's in the presence. Usually you don't think about it that way. You go to visit a sick person, you're not thinking about Shechina. But what we're saying here is that the Shechina is with the sick person. You go there, it's a special opportunity, even you could say, to pray for that sick person particularly. How do we know Hashem is zan the choleh? Zan means he satiates him. Hashem is onot. Shene'emar sustains him. Shene'emar, like it says in the pasuk, Hashem yisadenu al eres divai. The Mefarshim speak out based on a Gemara in Nidarim that even if a sick person doesn't eat much, he's still able to continue. HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes care of him. Such an idea is Hashem somehow gives him sustenance, not in the normal way. Takes care of such a choleh. Let's move on to the second section. We stand in the Mishnah. V'lo yikra le'or haner. We said a person cannot read on Shabbat by the light of the candle. What? Shema yatenu. You might tilt the candle so the oil goes to the wick if it's starting to flicker, and that would be an issue of havara. Now the Gemara tells us here a number of rules about this halacha that we have to remember. Qualifications, really. Amar Rabba. Rabba says like this. Afilu gavoa shtei komot. Even if the candle is twice the height of a person, va'afilu shtei mardaot. Mardaot is the goad. It's a stick they would use to poke the animals. I don't know if that's modern Hebrew. To get the animals to go. Is it mardeh? You call it in Hebrew too? To poke the horse or to poke the animal to move, the kitzer. So even if it's the height of shtei mardaot, which is high, like it's the length of it, I guess it was like a measuring stick. Va'afilu asara batim zoal gavzo. Even if it's 10 stories up, you're not allowed to read by the light of the fire. Now, why? What's the pshat? If it's that high, you can't reach it to tilt it. So why would you not be allowed to read by the light of that candle? Oh, so Rashi says this is one of the places we find the concept of lo plug. What is lo plug? If the Chachamim make a takana, gzera, they did not differentiate. Plug is differentiate. They don't make a chiluk, meaning it's a gzera across the board. Even if you can't reach it, they made a gzera. Why? Because if you do this, zila bamilta, it might become disgrace. The people start to take this lightly, and then people are going to actually start reading by it actually, and that would create an issue because people might tilt it. So it's all included in the gzeira. That's the point. It means the original gzeira that you can't read by the light of the candle also included the candle when it is a very tall height. It's lo plug. Continues the Gemara, another qualification. Chadhu de lo likri. It says lo yikra. It says he cannot read. One person. So only one person can't read by the light of a fire. Mashma hatre shapir dami. If two people were reading from the same book, they could read by the light of the fire. Now, why would they be allowed to? Vatanya. But the Braita says lo echad velo shnaim. So another Braita says not one or two people. Lo kashya. So it depends if they're reading the same topic or different topics. Very interesting. If we're both sitting and learning the sefer and the same topic, we're learning b'chavuta, and we have one sefer, we're learning like that. So if I would reach to tilt the fire, what's going to happen? You're going to say, stop. So there, it would be permitted to learn like that, to read by the light of the fire on Shabbat. But if I'm reading by myself, or even with two different people, but shtei inyanim, two different topics, the problem is somebody might tilt it, that would create an issue.
It's like one.
It's
because you're busy and he's busy.
Exactly.
You're busy.
You're not paying attention to each other. Yeah. I mean, that's the idea. When you learn with somebody, you should pay attention. You can't.
No, but you don't learn chavruta.
I'm just saying an example of chavruta. But if they're learning the same inyan, even if we're both reading the same, we're not b'chavruta. We're learning the same thing. So then, if I reach to tilt, since we're focused on the same topic, it says the same inyan. No, I saw in the Farshim do say if it's two different Sfarim, it's an issue already. Because if we have the same, both of us have our own book, it would be an issue. That wouldn't be acceptable. So in such a case, you would be allowed to read by the light of the fire if it's inyan echad, even if it's two people, because you'll prevent each other from doing it. Exactly, that's the idea. Yeah, and I just want to point something out. As I just told you, there's a concept of lo plug. So why don't we say lo plug here too? They'll watch each other. Yeah, but there's a gzeira. So what's the difference?
It's different.
What's the difference?
Because one can stop the other.
Yeah, but say the same thing. If it's 10 heights up, I can't reach it. So what's the difference? Why there goes there, lo plug, and here we're not?
What do you mean 10 heights up?
Usually, if there's a gzeira the Rabbanan make, it doesn't make a difference that the logic doesn't apply. We keep it as it is. So if the light is 10 stories up and you cannot reach it, you're not allowed to read by that fire. So why are you allowed to read if somebody's going to stop you where there's two people reading in Yan Echad? What's the difference? What's the chiluk?
It's the same idea when you're sitting to have a meal with somebody else or watch you, you're allowed to eat before mincha, even if it's half an hour, because somebody can, say, hey, time.
No, I hear the logic, but my question is, if we say lo plug, so why do we not say lo plug here? Shomet, you hear the question?
Yeah, well, there is no chiluk and there is chiluk here.
Right. Why are we making that distinction? So this is a rule about lo plug. The lo plug goes on what they were making, the case they made a gzeira on. The gzeira was on the lamp, on the candle. However the candle is, there's a gzeira. But the gzeira was not on the people. So if the people are different, then it changes the case altogether. Gzeira doesn't extend there. It's very interesting. Whenever the Chachamim make gzeira, so we look at what is the case they made a gzeira. In that case, lo plug. But if there's another factor here, i.e., people which the gzeira was not made on, so then there's no gzeira. So mele, if there's two people, they'll stop each other, we don't have to worry. Similar idea moving forward. Says the Gemara, this comes up a lot, by the way, the idea is they made lo plug on that, whatever they were talking about. So in this case is the lamp, but there's two people, that wasn't the gzeira. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Huna, a third qualification, Uva Madura, if you have a bonfire. Now a bonfire is a large fire, a lot of people are sitting around, so it's like two people reading, but it doesn't help you, because people are spread out, and what could easily happen is, in order to make the fire get bigger, somebody might push the wood or stir the coals, which would be an issue on Shabbat. Somebody will stop him. Doesn't help you, because the guy's far away. A Madura is a large fire. So therefore, if Madura filo asar b'nei adam, asur, even if there's 10 people there, it will be asur. Rashi says because they're far from each other, and it will be easy for one person to accidentally stir the coals, move the fire, that would be prohibited. So that's not like Shnei b'nei adam, like we said before. Amar Rava continues and says a fourth ruling on this. Im adam chashuvhu. If it's somebody who's chashuv and he would not usually stir the fire or tilt the light, mutar, it would be permitted. Why would it be permitted? An adam chashuv would usually tell his shamash. he would tell his attendant to tilt the oil. He's not going to do it. Again, so it's the same idea like two people. That wasn't the gzeira, and therefore it's mutar for him to read by the fire. He says the Gemara, wait a second. It says, Lo yikra le'or haner shema yateh. So it says he's not allowed to read by the light of the fire, to our Mishnah, because he might tilt it. Braita. Rabbi Yishmael ben Elisha. Yishmael ben Elisha said, based on that, Ani yakra velo ateh. He said, I know better. I could read by the light of the fire. I don't have to worry about the takanat chazal. But pam achat, one time, he said about himself, Kara ubikesh la'atot. I was reading by the light of the fire, and I wanted to tilt the oil. So when he realized that, I made a mistake. I shouldn't have been mizalzel. I shouldn't have taken lightly the gzeira of Chazal. Wow. And the Gemara goes even further. Amar. So then Rabbi Yishmael ben Elisha commented about this. He says, Ka'am gdolim divrei chachamim. How important are the words of the chachamim? Shayu amrim lo yikra le'or haner. They said, you can't because there's a gzeira. I thought I can be better than that. I made a mistake. Now in this first version is ubikesh. He didn't actually tilt it, but he caught himself realizing he was about to. So he realized he had made a mistake. Rabbi Natan says a different version goes, Kara veita, he actually did tilt the oil. This Rabbi Yishmael ben Elisha, he actually ended up doing it. The katava pinkaso. Now this Rabbi Yishmael ben Elisha had a notebook. You know, now if you do an aveira, you can't bring a korban chatat. But he wrote in his notebook, Ani Yishmael ben Elisha, Kariti v'iteti ner b'Shabbat. I was reading by the fire and I tilted the oil on Shabbat. I'm going to bring a fatty chatat when the Beit HaMikdash is built. But the point is, what do you see from here? You see, the Gemara seems to be saying at least, he was an Adam Chashuv. He was an Adam Chashuv. He was a great Torah scholar. And he seemed to say that he had a problem with, even he shouldn't have been reading by the fire.
But not necessarily that he
Meaning from the story we see he shouldn't have been. That's the point. He thought he could override the rule, but he realized he had made a mistake.
But he leaned on the fact that the Gemara said Adam Chashuv. He considered himself Adam Chashuv.
He seemed to be Adam Chashuv. No. The kasha is, we just said, Rava just told us that Adam Chashuv doesn't have an issue because his attendant will tilt the oil. So he's not going to do it himself.
But
and therefore
how we know that Adam Chashuv mean to, maybe it's not about him. Maybe it's Talmid Chacham, but it's not to say that he have always a shamash.
Okay, I hear what you're saying, but the point the Gemara assumes is, it sounds like he was a Tana. A Tana was an Adam Chashuv, Rabbi Yishmael ben Elisha. If that's the case, it seems like after the fact we learned even he shouldn't have been reading by it. So it seems Adam Chashuv does not have a leniency.
What Rashi said was Adam Chashuv?
So the Gemara answers, Rabbi Abba Shani Rabbi Yishmael ben Elisha is different. Ho'il umesim atzmo divrei Torah ke'hediot. When he would learn Torah, he didn't treat himself with great respect. It was like a hediot. He was like a normal person. So perhaps, now it doesn't say why exactly, perhaps he would learn like a normal person, not like an Adam Chashuv, like maybe a greater person or somebody else, and therefore he didn't have this attendant that he would tell to go tilt the fire. He would do it himself. That's why he should not have done it. I saw one of the Mefarshim say something very interesting over here. He says, we know, when we read Parashat Chatat, it's as if we brought a Chatat. So he says, why did he write down in his Pinkas that when the Beit HaMikdash is built, I'll bring Korban Chatat? He just say Parashat Chatat.
No, because what he says is Midah Keneged Midah. We can say that, right?
No.
Because who said Shema Yateh? Chazal.
Chachamim.
So the Chazal said it's like you feel like you be Chatat. You don't take serious the Divrei Torah of Chazal, and he קראת לו הנר, so this thing doesn't work for you.
Very interesting.
You know?
Very interesting.
חז"ל אומרים, נשמה פרספתנו. מי אמר את זה?
התורה.
חז"ל יש להם כבר להגיד, שאתה כל קורבנות, כאילו הקרבת קורבן. אבל אתה לא החזקת מדבר חז"ל. זה לא עובד איתך. אתה צריך להביא ממש קורבן.
יפה מאוד. So I saw a different pshat though. What Yochai is saying is that if he was mekil, he was mizalzel and takanat chazal, so for him to just say the parashat chatat is not effective. I saw a different pshat though. It might help as if you brought a korban chatat, but you didn't give the portions to the kohen. There's certain parts of the korban you need to give to the kohen. You understand? You might have been yotzeh, bring a korban chatat when you say the parashat chatat. But the owner of a korban, he gives certain pieces of meat to the kohen as part of the process. You can't do that because you don't have meat to give to the kohen. So for that, he needs to bring a chatat, when the Beit HaMikdash is built. I mean, you also see an amazing thing, the sensitivity these people had is, he did an Avera, he recorded, he had a book. He had a notebook. It was like, he was already, first of all, he was thinking about the Beit HaMikdash being built. And second of all, I'm going to have to bring chataot, chas v'shalom, if we thought about how many chataot we would have to bring. Forget about it. It would be a disaster. We don't think about that so much. But forget about a farm. The point is the sensitivity they had, that they were on a different level altogether. It was
realized
he probably only had a few, by the way. He had a notebook.
He's the only one.
Otherwise, it was 20 notebooks. He had one notebook.
Yeah,
Unbelievable. Kids, so let's continue. Now there's a stira in Braitot. Let's see this. Tani Chada, one Braita says, now we're talking over here as the attendant, the shamash, who used to serve his master, okay? He wanted to look at the dishes before he gave them to serve his master, that they shouldn't be dirty. Okay? So Tani Chada, one Braita says, Shamash bodeh kosot u'ke'arot le'oraner. A shamash could check the cups and plates by the light of the fire to see if they're dirty. Okay? The Tani Yidach, but another Braita says, Lo yivdok. He can't. So stira. One Braita says he could check to see if they're dirty before he serves his master. The other one says he cannot.
So what's the pshat? About the clothing of the men of the way. If they
okay, I hear that. Okay. But we're not looking at the kelim in terms of what the kli is. We're looking if they're dirty or clean. That's what he wants to know. Right? We're not, what's the nature of the keli? We're looking at, is it dirty or is it clean?
But it depends with the color of the keli. If the color is dark, it's very hard to see the dirt.
Okay, that's interesting, I hear.
If the color is white, let's say.
So the Gemara says a different chiluk. The Gemara says like this. It says it depends if it's the regular shamash or it's a substitute. What's the difference?
regular shamash, הוא יודע מה קורה במטבח, בכלים וזה.
It's not the pshat the Gemara says.
No.
Very interesting. Listen to how the Gemara learns. A regular shamash, he's a hired hand. He's there for a long time. He is much more scared to serve his master with dirty kelim. If the guy's only there for one day, he's a temporary shamash, he's leaving tomorrow, he doesn't care so much. He'll serve the master with a dirty kli. He doesn't really care. So he's not going to make a mistake of tilting the fire to see if it's so clean. A little schmutz, give it into the master. He doesn't care so much. But the regular attendant, he's going to be much more careful, and therefore, if he wants to, he'll be much more analytical, put it by the fire, tilt the fire to figure out if it's clean or dirty. So it depends, is it the regular shamash, or is it a she'eno kavua, the non-regular one? See that inside. Lo kashya. Answer number one. Kan b'shamash kavua, kan b'shamash she'eno kavua. If it's a permanent one, that's the second Braita, it's asur, because we're worried, because he's scared his master will be upset with the dirty vessel, so he'll be much more careful, and he might tilt the fire to see if it's dirty. Kan b'shamash she'eno kavua, as opposed to if he's just temporary, he doesn't really care, he's leaving tomorrow, and therefore he could use the fire because he's not going to be so careful anyway. 1 second. Yeah. The second answer. Hava b'shamash kavua. Really, we're talking about a permanent shamash, both cases, both braitaot. Velo kashya. It depends what type of lantern you have, what type of wick you have. Oil or neft? Nafta. Do you say that in Hebrew also, nafta? Neft, you say neft. Oil, that's the one we're worried about. That's where there's a gzera, you might tilt it. So there, if it's the regular shamash by the oil, it would be a problem to check the vessel if it's clean or not, because you might tilt it to see better. Neft smells very bad. So we're not worried that the shamash will tilt it. They usually stay away from tilting that because it was masliach, says Rashi, it had a very bad smell. So he's not going to tilt that. You could check the keli by that neft candle because he's not going to touch it anyways. Very interesting. That's what the Gemara says. Fine. So now the Gemara, based on that, asks the following question. Shamash she'eno kavua b'demish chamahu. What if it's a not permanent attendant, it's a temporary attendant, but he's checking the kelim by an oil lantern, by an oil candle. So he's temporary, so you could have a leniency there, but it's an oil candle, so that's a chumrah. So do we have to be worried about him checking by the candle or not? So Rav says halacha, he could, it's mutar, but ve'ein morin kain. We don't paskin l'rabim this halacha. Now this is a very interesting idea. The halacha is it's mutar, but we wouldn't go and teach this in public.
What is, I'm sorry?
Halacha ve'en morin ken. This is the halacha, but we won't paskin this in public. The reason we won't paskin in public, exception. We don't want people to start to be mezalzel. So it is the halacha. If somebody asks, you'll tell him, but ve'en morin ken. we won't paskin barabim like this. Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba amar halacha umarin actually it is the halacha, and you could teach it publicly. Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba said it's perfectly permissible. Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba, the Gemara tells the related story. Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba ikla lebei Rav Asi. So one time he went to the house of Rav Asi. Kam Sham'eh, so the attendant of Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba, who was with him, got up, kabadik lenahora de sharga, and he was checking by the oil light, which was oil, the kelim to see if they were clean. So Amrle Devitu, so the wife of Rav Asi, the Balabayit, turned to her husband, and she said, Umar lo avid hachi, you don't do this. Means you usually, if you see that the shamash is checking, our shamash is checking, you tell him to stop. So why don't you tell the Eved of Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba who's visiting you also to stop? So Amar la shavki. So Rav Asi said, leave him alone. Kirabe sfirale, he holds like his Rebbe. What does it mean? Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba hold halacha umarin ken. Says Rav Asi, it's in my house, but it's the shamash of Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba. So for me, it's as if he's a not kavua type of shamash. And therefore, since it's a not kavua type of shamash, and Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba held halacha umarin ken, it's perfectly acceptable for him to do this. I don't have to stop him. My regular Eved, my regular shamash, I would have to stop because we don't have that leniency. But since it's a Eved she'eno kavua, shamash she'eno kavua, as far as it goes for me, therefore it would be acceptable for him to do this.
Although it is in my house.
Because it's in my house.
Although it's in my house.
Yeah, because it's in my house, that's the point. Because he's not my shamash, he's really Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba's shamash. So therefore it's considered... Exactly, that's considered lo shamash kavua, exactly.
Can we continue tomorrow?
You want to stop here? You're finished? Mom is finished, huh? We're almost... Okay, fine, fine, we can stop here, fine. We'll pick up tomorrow, fine. B'ezat Hashem.
Tonight or Safazara?
We'll do chazara tonight, God willing. Okay, בסדר.
I want to learn, but I...
you look exhausted, Matan. Alright, we'll stop here at the bottom of Yibet Amud Bet. B'ezat Hashem, we'll pick up tomorrow with your Gimel Amud Aleph. B'ezat Hashem.